Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. We're glad you're interested in learning more about calculating cost per lead and return on investment. My name is Ted Gowdy, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at NKP Medical, a digital marketing firm specializing in patient growth for medical practices for more than 15 years. I've got just a few notes before I turn it over to Paul. First, we'll try our best to stick to 20 minutes because we know your time is valuable. If you have questions now or during the presentation, go ahead and type them into the webinar chat. Finally, we'll have the recording available within a few days, so please send me an email if you'd like a copy. With that, I'd like to introduce Paul Phillips, who is the CEO at NKP. Paul started running this business around 4 years ago, taking over from his brother who founded the business. After graduating from UCLA, Paul worked in investment banking and then attended Harvard Business School before working in private equity and finance for more than a decade. His business background gives Paul an analytical and data-driven view of marketing, which blends well with our team of creative and strategic experts. With that, I'll hand it over to Paul. Paul?
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited today to talk about a framework you can use to evaluate what the proper cost of a lead is for your practice, or essentially how much you should be willing to pay for the next lead that comes in the door. Before we jump into it, I wanted to set the terminology so that we're all on the same page about how we talk about this. So we think about this as a sales funnel with at the very top are the leads coming in that then become opportunities that then become clients. And so leads could be anybody coming through your website or emailing you wanting an appointment, calling on the phone, or responding to an ad. So it's the widest net of people that express interest in your practice. And then opportunities are those leads that convert into maybe an appointment, if that's how you want to define an opportunity, a scheduled time to come in and talk about a procedure. And then the opportunities convert into an actual paying client. And so a fraction of those opportunities will become a client. So here's some simple math. So if we have 10 leads that come in via a multitude of different marketing avenues, and those turn into 4 opportunities. And so essentially 6 of those leads aren't good leads. They're not interested in what you have to sell, or the timing's not right, or some other thing disqualifies them. But it turns into 4 opportunities. And then of those opportunities, 2 become clients. And so in this scenario, you need 10 leads to turn into 2 clients. And I'll introduce a couple concepts here also. So the ratio that the 10 leads become 4 opportunities is a conversion ratio. And so in this case, 40% of your leads convert into an opportunity. And similarly, there's a ratio of how many opportunities convert into clients. And so in this math, we're using 50% that converts into clients. Those numbers are important to think about, especially at the end as we talk about what the true cost of a lead is. And those numbers, are not static. You can influence those numbers by the quality of the leads coming in. So example, better leads will convert to more opportunities. You can also influence the conversion of those opportunities with little things like how the appointments go or how easy is your practice to deal with. So anyways, those are the key terms that we'll be talking about, is leads that become opportunities that then become clients. So in order to talk about how much a lead is worth or what you should be willing to pay for a lead, we first need to talk about how much a client is worth. And so I'm going to walk through some simple math of determining what a client is worth. And you'll see that it's very different for different procedures. And so if we were to help you put this together, you would be, looking at this on a procedure by procedure basis to understand, what sales are involved, how recurring are the sales, and what profit is involved in a particular procedure or treatment. So I've chosen kind of maybe 2 extremes to show the example. So one being Botox, where maybe a client comes in and pays $350 to get Botox done. And then on the other extreme, a much larger procedure like a Brazilian butt lift. And let's say that client pays $10,000. And so the next step after quantifying, how much you charge for these procedures is to figure out what your profit is on those procedures. And so to do that, we're going to look at what the variable cost is of each procedure. So for Botox, maybe it's the cost of the nurse, applying the Botox, and the actual sort of Botox that you're purchasing from your supplier. For a Brazilian butt lift, it's probably a lot more. Maybe it's anesthesia, the cost of a surgery center, and a bunch of other things like that. So simply by subtracting your cost from your sales, you arrive at the profit contribution. So let's say in this scenario that Botox is generating $250 of profit for the practice, and the Brazilian butt lift is generating $6,000 for the practice. And so while those show kind of two very extremes, something to consider in this math is how often the client comes back for recurring procedures, including the one, like in this case, Botox. Maybe you can determine that your average client comes back at least 8 times to do Botox over the course of your relationship with that customer. Whereas for a Brazilian butt lift, it's probably a one-time thing. Now, you can get even sort of fancier and talk about how that the fact that Botox might just be sort of a gateway treatment into much bigger treatments through the life of the customer. But, so you'd have to look at your customer databases to understand, how that relationship works. But for the simplicity, let's say a Botox treatment gets 8. And so the lifetime value of one Botox new customer on average is going to be $2,000. So that's 8 treatments worth $250 each, whereas the lifetime value of a Brazilian butt lift might be $6,000. Again, this is not taking into consideration the fact that they may come back for something totally unrelated just because they're now comfortable with your practice. So now that you've figured out how much a client is worth, we can look at how much should you be willing to pay for one extra client. And so again, I'm picking sort of an extreme case of just that one extra client. How much should it be worth? How much should you be willing to pay for it? And I'll explain in the next slide why, how the full picture comes into the mix. But it's helpful to think about this extreme case. So in order to think about what you'd be willing to pay for one more client, a few things need to be considered. So one is profit maximization the goal? Is that the goal of your practice? Is that your personal goal? Are you aiming to have essentially a schedule that is as packed as it can be and maximizing profit? Or are you more comfortable with something that's 80% packed, maybe because that's the lifestyle that you want to have, or there may be other considerations that you want to not have your schedule packed out 100%. And so secondly, thinking about what are your capacity constraints. And so capacity constraints, are generally like at a point in time. And so you can expand your capacity, for example, maybe by partnering with another doctor that you can do procedures with, or by opening up another facility that has more space, or by hiring a larger staff, as an example. So capacity constraints at your current time is what you would take in consideration. And then another thing to think about is just the value of your time. So are you willing to spend an extra 5 hours a week to make X amount of extra profit? Is that worth your time, or would you rather spend that time doing something with your family or something recreational? So in this extreme example of thinking about one more patient, a useful example is an airline. What are they willing to accept to sell that one last seat on the airplane? And so generally you think about what is the incremental, they're going to think about what is the incremental cost? What's the cost of the food I'm going to serve that person? What's the cost of the extra fuel related to the weight of that person being on the plane? And maybe what's the administrative cost of issuing tickets and that kind of thing? Again, they may consider other things outside of that narrow focus, like maybe it's a better experience for their overall clients if the plane is not totally packed. Or maybe it leaves an open seat for those one-off scenarios when a business traveler books a seat very last minute that's very profitable. But let's take again this narrow example of they have one seat, that plane is going to fly at 12 o'clock, and if there's not a person paying for it, that opportunity is gone. It's in a similar way, when you shut your doors to your practice at night and there was unfilled space in the schedule, that slot is forever gone. And so, the technical answer to what should you be willing to pay for that one last patient is anything more than the value of that customer. So if a customer's value to you is $1,000, you should be actually willing to pay all the way up to $999 to get that extra dollar of profit. And of course, that doesn't quite sound right. And so you would back off of that and really figure out what you're most comfortable with. But we find that practices often don't think about it in this way and leave profit on the table by not thinking about maximizing the profit and getting to their goal. So it's a helpful extreme to kind of think about it as that one extra seat on the plane. And so now that you know that in some scenarios you should be willing to pay what could be a huge amount for that last client or that last person on the plane, you're probably thinking that doesn't feel very comfortable, that why would I spend a whole lot of money on acquiring clients? And so I'm going to introduce a concept of sort of a portfolio of marketing. And so every lead serves a different purpose. Every opportunity with a customer serves a bit of a different purpose. And if you think about it as a portfolio, much like your retirement investments, you're likely invested in more than one thing, and each thing serves a different purpose in your portfolio. And together it builds a solid portfolio that achieves what you want. In the same way, you should think about marketing as a portfolio that will deliver your practice goals. And so in this portfolio, we're going to start with the bottom, which is just existing clients and word of mouth clients. They're probably the base of your business, and it's very easy to market to them. You probably keep them warm with some loyalty marketing, some email marketing, send them a note on their birthday, that kind of thing. It's very low cost and causes them to both come in for their next procedure that they want, but also refer you to their friends. And so there's that base of customers that you rightfully should not be paying a whole lot of money to fill up part of your schedule. And then the second are people that I'll call kind of logical prospects. So these are new patients that really fit in with what you're doing. And so they're likely in your same geography. They're searching online for exactly the procedures that you offer, and they're a likely candidate. Maybe they talk to 2 or 3 other competitors in the market, but you're going to get your fair share of these prospects, and it helps grow your business. And so to market to those logical prospects, things like having a website, and having a website that ranks well for people in that area that are searching for the types of procedures that you do, and then having the support behind it to have good, reputation online with reviews and other things like that drive prospects to your website and cause them to convert and call you and become a lead is what's critical to marketing to this group. And the cost of that is in the sort of medium category. It's definitely more expensive than the people that just sort of walk in to your office every month or are referred by a friend. But it makes a lot of sense to spend money on this, because otherwise you'd be leaving some pretty easy or logical opportunities on the table. And often this is where practices stop. And the result is that they have more room in their practice to take on more procedures that would be profitable to them, but they're leaving that on the table. And so this next group of prospects I'm going to call incremental prospects. So these are patients that you can layer on top of your core base of clients that are already coming in, and your clients that are almost automatically coming in because you're doing a good job with your website and ranking well with Google, and you have a good reputation online. So how do you target these incremental prospects? Again, these are ones that otherwise would not be coming in your door unless you adopt more of a hunter mentality to go out and find them. From a tactical standpoint, one of the most obvious ways to go get them is to pay for advertising. Digital advertising on Google, referred to as pay-per-click advertising, the same type of concept on social media platforms, getting in front of clients with advertising that you basically pay to the extent it works. And then a newer thing that we're offering, which is geo-targeted advertising, which is advertising to people that maybe walk in the door of your competitor or are otherwise at places that you think your type of client spends time at, a restaurant or a particular store, for example. And so the cost to acquire these leads or these prospects is probably going to be the highest in your portfolio of marketing, but it still makes sense because as long as you're disciplined about what you're willing to pay for that last client, you can continue to spend money at a higher cost per lead than the other two categories and really be coming out ahead. There are other things besides paid advertising to get those incremental prospects that we offer as a service also. We can talk about that. And so now that you're thinking about this portfolio of marketing and what a new client is worth to you, let's talk about how much a lead should cost. And so this gets back in just basically simple math. And so to the left is the scenario that we walked through at the very beginning, where 5 leads essentially become 1 client. And so we're going to use that same scenario, but put dollars associated with it. And so to the right, you see that we're going to determine that 1 client is worth $1,000 to you. And so that's easily penciled out, with a Botox or a Brazilian butt lift, you can easily come to the conclusion that a next client's going to be worth $1,000 to you. And so then you can kind of work backwards from that $1,000 and say that if I need 1 client, then I need 2 opportunities. And so that means I'm willing to spend $500 on each opportunity to convert into 1 client. And then you work backwards again and say, okay, in order to get 2 opportunities, I need 5 leads. And so you should be willing to pay $200 for each lead, which will drive 2 opportunities, which will get you 1 client. So at the very top, you're basically paying $200 times 5 or $1,000, and that's going to filter down to that 1 client that's going to generate a significant amount of value for your practice. And so that's a way that you can think about what your willingness to pay, or how much am I willing to pay for a lead, and it can be different or should be different for each procedure. And so then I'm going to introduce just the last thing, which is a couple of different ways to measure success, or to step back to 30,000 feet and say, is this working? And so one metric that you can use is return on investment. And so this is just looking at the total value of a customer divided by how much you had to invest to get them. And so in this scenario where we invested $1,000 and we're going to get a Botox customer that over the life of that Botox, those Botox treatments is worth $6,000 to me, that's a fantastic return on investment. And so it's actually 6x or 6 times the $1,000 that you spend, or another way to phrase it is it's a 600% return on investment. And so as long as you're able to get those clients that are worth $6,000 by spending $1,000 per client, you should be willing to do that over and over and over again. A different way to measure it is by looking at how much revenue each dollar of ad spend is generating. And so this is simply looking at the total revenue of the client. So let's say the Brazilian butt lift client has $10,000 of revenue and you invested $1,000 to get that client. So that would be a 10% return on ad spend. It's basically your total revenue divided by your investment in advertising. There's other ways to look at it, maybe just a percentage of sales in total, what your marketing spend as a percentage of sales, and make sure that at a high level it comes in at what you're hoping. But these are 2 metrics that will really help you understand from a high level if your stuff is working. Then, so the exciting thing is once you've nailed down these numbers and figured out, how much does a procedure cost? What should I be willing to pay to get that next customer? And how much is that customer worth to me? And you get comfortable with what those numbers are, then you can expand rapidly because you're now comfortable knowing that, first of all, there's a portfolio of marketing that I'm investing in. But secondly, there's a scientific almost way to understand what your willingness to pay for that extra lead should be. And once you figure out that model, you can literally pour fuel on the flames and grow your practice significantly very quickly by just repeating what you're doing, but on a bigger scale, by spending more money on paid advertisement, for example, to get those incremental customers, or by spending more money on optimizing your website to get more traffic to it. So that's really what the whole purpose of this conversation is that practices often do this math sort of back of the envelope or in their head, and we find that they normally come up with the wrong answer. That when you go through your information about customers and think through your prices and that kind of stuff, that often you come up with a much higher willingness to pay, and it indicates that you should be spending more on advertising to reach your goals of growing the practice. And that's what we do here at NKP. We are all about practice growth, and we have a bunch of different tools to help you drive that practice growth. Thanks for your time. I hope this was helpful.
Thanks, Paul. I see we had some questions come in via chat, and I will make sure I respond to those via email. You're welcome to email me with any other questions, or if you'd like a copy of the recording. At NKP, we specialize in driving new leads and patient growth through digital marketing. We're continually expanding into emerging technologies which give our clients a leg up in competitive online spaces. We'd love the opportunity to show you how we can help drive more patients into your practice, so please email me and we can set up a quick initial meeting. Thanks for attending our webinar, and we'll see you again soon.